Okay, so Heist Part 1. Um, yeah, oof. It's rough leveling in Heist. We're 48 now. We're at like 8 hours or so. So 1 second. 8 hours and a minute and two. Death should be 1. And the death was 2 seconds after dinging 40. It was in the middle of a fight, and I lost 30% fire res, which made me go negative on my fire res, and I just exploded. It was like within seconds. It was pretty funny. Just didn't realize where I was in the leveling curve. As far as interesting items to potentially start a build with, we got this. We have a pretty poorly rolled Corletus signature and a mediocre roll on an Edge of Madness. Is it bait? Quite possible, but it's a 5-link. I mean, a 5-link at this level is insane. It's just that it's so many respec points. I can't afford it right now. But at least there's something that's like trying to tempt me. That's it, so. And then that was found like level 47, I believe. 3, picked up these nodes for reservation efficiency, working on these nodes for reservation efficiency so we can run our grace and determination easily. Mana leech, mana on hit. As you can tell, I'm having mana issues. I picked up these nodes to increase my mana pool because we're having mana issues. And a big part of the reason we have mana issues is we found a storm cloud. A storm cloud has a pretty good attack speed, and that combined with elemental hit will lead to mana issues. Elemental hit, creating multiple projectiles, elemental hit, elemental damage to attacks, and Trinity. A penetrating arrow quiver makes a huge difference when you are leaving and trying to blow up a room full of dudes. We have storm chargers, which have some lightning resistance and 20% movement speed, pretty good. And increased effect of shock, sure. Working on resists. Don't have fantastic life and resists. This thing's awful. Well, it has fire resist and cold resist. I think our resists are capped, and we have some chaos resist. So let's take a look at what's happening, and let's also talk about why is it feeling so awful, right? Because I'm sure this is not the first video you're gonna find that says Heist feels awful. The first few levels took really long, and one of the challenges is kind of the gameplay loop doesn't lend itself to continuously doing stuff. Let me make sure I actually eat my flasks, otherwise I do die. And the problem with the gameplay loop is that this is tedious. It's not very exciting. At some point you just stop caring and start running past things because you realize you'll kill them on the way out when there's at least more things to kill. And what's happening is, you're picking up some loot at this point. I think I just picked up some jeweler's orbs. And the jeweler's orbs and all the popcorn currencies, in a way, are a big part of the source of the problem. And the reason for that is that if I have them in my inventory, what just happened is I started new stacks because it can't combine stacks of contraband, right? The items you haven't gotten out of the zone yet, with the items that you did get out of the zone. And that means that there's just a lot of inventory management going on. And that's super unfortunate. Because that just stops you from, while playing the game. Which is something that wasn't an issue at all in Infinite Delve, because in Infinite Delve, if you wanted to run another delve after the one you did, at some point you ran out of inventory, but there weren't enough items. So it wasn't really an issue. And the other thing is that if you did pick up a whole bunch of items, then you can only run 2 instead of running like 3 or 4. That's not the case with Heist. You have the final room item, right? You have to vendor that thing. And then you have the all of the contraband stuff that starts new stacks, meaning that when you leave, you have now an additional stack of wisdom scrolls. I just picked up some wisdom scrolls a little bit earlier, which I'm sure somebody will give me grief about. But those wisdom scrolls are going to start a new stack. And that's the same for all of the little popcorn currencies I just picked up. And that makes inventory management a nightmare. And this is kind of the part of the heist that we're doing right now, of like running away. Like, okay, it's challenging, there's a bunch of fights, you have to pay attention, you can't just run through. Like, on occasion, things have to happen. You kind of get to decide, like, how long do I want to hang out for experience or more stuff? Do I want to run over for a little bit of loot? And then you have this part, which is a total letdown. I mean, this is the nothing is going on. And then you come into town. And my zoning is pretty quick. You have to go to this guy, because you have to get this stuff out of your inventory. And if you don't remove all this stuff, all these things don't stack with the next one, right? If you find another jeweler orbs, that's another inventory slot. Same for this guy, this guy didn't stack with these afterwards, this didn't stack, this didn't stack, this didn't stack, this didn't stack. So you're just stuck going back and forth to your stash, to the dude, handing stuff in, dumping things, and then you're to the point of like, oh, I can do it again. So that's pretty bad. And slugging through the first 40 levels was a slog. And I'm still playing because I know that there have to be grand heists. And I hope that those are going to be more fun. But getting to that point and asking people like, okay, get through this kind of slow 5-hour tutorial to go play the interesting content, that's a hard sell for a limited event. That's just a hard sell in general. So how can you like modify this gameplay loop in a way that doesn't feel this way? Well, let's kind of describe what we would want to see happen. Please tell me I cleaned up. Yes, I did. So this can still, this little zone here that we go through is fine, as long as it has a purpose other than, slow you down so you run over. So we have all of these little loot boxes that we are running by. And rather than spitting out loot, what we could do is have like a loot bar similar to what we see for like the 4-way legions or the 5-way, whatever. Any of the legion like fights. We have just a loot bar that fills up in here. Rather than you click things, it adds stuff to the loot bar. And then once you leave successfully, that little zone that we just were in, well, that's where your loot explosion would happen after you successfully leave. So a couple of things. You feel way less bad about dying because you don't create the loot explosion when you die. You also remove a lot of the tediousness of having items that don't stack, right? I just picked up some wisdom scrolls. Those don't stack with my other wisdom scrolls. I missed something? Oh, hey. Well, I'm gonna have all the unique bows sooner or later. Because you're not really going to encounter the stuff until at the end. Having the occasional loot stuff coming from like killing mobs or whatever, fine. You can make people pick that up, so you don't have to change that. But if the boxes you click, effectively just add to a loot bar, and that loot bar explodes after you're done. Might be a much more satisfying game loop. It also means that chaining these things together becomes far more feasible. And people still kind of have that risk reward sense, because you see the loot bar become bigger and bigger and bigger, and you know that if you die, that loot bar goes away. So yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest issue with Heist. It is you spend a lot of time in town because you have to. And I think the way that you would do this faster is to just not pick things up at all, which isn't fun. Right? You want to click the thingies to get the stuffs, but it's so tedious to do that and to pick all the stuff up and, you know, gather your loot and worry about your inventory space, that you pretty much have to vendor every single run. And if you have to vendor every single run, well, that's not enjoyable. Like, imagine having to go to town every single zone. I mean, you know, people say like the hideout is lava. We have like a hideout with a suboptimal layout. Like, we have to do a pretty good amount of running when we get out of this zone to be able to go to the next place. And for anybody who's not playing like a class with massive movement speed, that's really annoying. Oh. Ah, well, guess I can just tank that. Yeah, I think that's kind of the unfortunate thing about this event. And I hope that they take the opportunity to learn from this and kind of like figure out like, okay, you know, we just put a whole bunch of people into this gameplay loop. How can we smooth it out? And I wouldn't be surprised if a fair amount of the complaints could be handled by saying like, okay, we're going to make it easier for you to chain things together, and the loot bar would effectively allow you to do that. Right, so at this point we have a loot bar. You can even these rares and stuff like that, you can give them little loot icons to try and convince people to kill them, and make the decision on whether or not it's worth it or not. And then when you get to the point where you leave, you know, maybe make that zone a little bit more appropriate for the event, but you're here and you get your loot explosion at this point. You pick up what you want, it would stack with the stuff that you have, you don't have to manage inventory inside the heist, and you go back to town. You don't have to worry about dying. You do have to worry about people standing on top of your portal, but I think that that's kind of an interesting... It's kind of the way that I view where my frustration with the gameplay loop comes from, and I think that there's possibly some opportunities to learn from this event and make that something in the future. But we'll see. Anyway, that's it for now. This is a lot shorter than the first time I tried to voice these thoughts, so let me know what you think of it. I think that there's not much that has to change with Heist to make it enjoyable. I think the problem that's with Heist is that you have too many trips, and the excitement, the anticipation isn't there. Right? If you have a loot bar and you see that loot bar the whole damn time, you have an anticipation for a loot explosion once you leave that zone. Right? That there's like you're building up to something. Whereas right now you're just trying to jam all the stuff into your backpack because it doesn't stack the way you'd like it to. And then you have to, when you leave, reorganize your backpack, and then you can do the next thing. I think that is a big part of the frustration. Is all the trips to sell the stuff, and you can see like from what I picked up. I mean, I'm playing a bow character. I picked up a couple of bows, some essences. I have some contracts that I'm running. You don't have a lot of space to work with, especially not when you would possibly pick up 2 8-slot idle thingies for the reward rooms. Good luck. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you did this for a while and said, nope, there's no way in hell I'm doing that, I can appreciate that and understand that. I was to that point until I found the Edge of Madness. How appropriate. And I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. Maybe I can pivot into that. It's a 5 link already. I have the Corlius signature already. I have like 2 items that talk about crits and ailments, and that's kind of what I've been looking at recently. So maybe we'll see. But I also realized that might be a whole lot of copium going on trying to justify spending time on this game mode. Hope you're having a good weekend, and we'll see if there's a part 2.